Hi there guys, welcome to Trekkie's Guide to the Galaxy. My name's Carl, and in today's video we're going to be doing an episode review of The Wounded from Star Trek The Next Generation. Now if you haven't done already or you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing, hit that like button for the video, and also click the bell to receive notifications of whenever we post any new content. So without further delay, let's set a course for The Next Generation Season 4, Episode 12. Engage. Okay guys, this is your red alert warning for spoilers. We will be going into detail about the episode during this video, so if you haven't seen it and don't want to know what happens, suggest you go and watch it first. So, Season 4 of The Next Generation, Episode 12, The Wounded. Directed by Chip Chalmers, who also directed Captain's Holiday, a great Next Generation episode, and also the fantastic Deep Space Nine episode, The Magnificent Ferengi, one of my personal favourites. Credited in the writing is Jerry Taylor, who went on to become co-executive producer alongside Mr. Rick Berman. Considering the themes of the episode, it aired at a very poignant time on 28th of January 1991 during the Gulf War conflict. Set on stardate 44429.6, a twice decorated Starfleet captain, Benjamin Maxwell, in command of the USS Phoenix, has seemingly gone rogue and began attacking Cardassian supply ships and installations. Set 1 year after the war with the Cardassians, Picard and the crew of the Enterprise are tasked with finding Captain Maxwell. To assist and monitor their efforts, the Enterprise plays host to 3 Cardassian officers led by Gul Macet, and tensions run high with some of the crew who have yet to come to terms with having the Cardassians as their allies. So who are our main characters in this episode? Well, of course, Captain Jean-Luc Picard takes centre stage, commanding the Enterprise in the mission to find Captain Maxwell and prevent an all-out war with the Cardassians. Miles Edward O'Brien gets some brilliant screen time in this particular episode, and it's only one of, up to now, probably about only the second episode where he actually gets any major screen time and a big point in the plot. Next on the list is Gul Macet, the first Cardassian Gul that we ever encounter in Star Trek. And of course we have the main villain of the episode, Captain Benjamin Maxwell, in command of the USS Phoenix. We've got several particular points of interest in this episode. So, this is the first episode where we ever see the Cardassians in the Star Trek universe. Therefore, it stands to reason this is also the first time we ever see a Cardassian Galore-class warship. In this particular episode, it's the Traeger. It's also our first close-up look at the beautiful Nebula-class starship. Although it's not the first time this starship was shown. Very originally, the starship was part of the crippled Starfleet Armada at Wolf 359 during the Borg invasion. Marc Alaimo returns to Trek for the third time, this time as the Cardassian officer Gul Macet. And it's really Marc Alaimo that lays the foundation for the Cardassian race, and you can definitely see where the traits of his future role as Gul Dukat come into play. So what did I like about this episode? Well, for an introduction to a major alien race in the Star Trek universe, we actually get to find out a lot about the Cardassians during this, their first outing. Their deep mistrust of alien races is immediately obvious, and I love the way during this whole episode, Gul Macet's constantly pushing Picard, trying to find weaknesses. The Cardassian skill for manipulating the situation and forcing their opponents into making the move that they want them to make is matched only really by the Romulans, and they will seemingly take the simplest emotive reason they can find to justify their actions and turn themselves into the victim of the situation. In fact, I can't think of a single character trait in the Cardassians that hasn't been carried forward into future episodes and series, which when you consider how some other races have changed since their introduction, take the Ferengi for example in the Season 1 episode The Last Outpost, it suggests to me that a lot of thought was put into the Cardassians, and that they were always intended to go on to become a regular fixture in the show, which of course they then did. As I mentioned, we also get some gorgeous external shots of the Nebula-class starship in this episode. I mean, it's obviously a rehash of the Galaxy-class starship, but you know what? Even though all the elements are the same, I really like this configuration. It looks to me like the Galaxy-class's nippy little brother, and would probably give the Galaxy-class a run for its money, at least when it comes to speed. Another thing I love about this episode is the way Picard's portrayed. He's under immense pressure to keep control of the situation and prevent another all-out war with the Cardassians. And he has to play such a fine balancing game, with Gul Macet permanently pushing him to do more to stop the USS Phoenix. And on several occasions, Picard shows why he's considered such a great diplomat, keeping his command over the situation and making sure that Gul Macet is pushed back and put in his place, but without overstepping the mark. He's easily a match for the cunning manipulation of the Cardassian. And this episode really does show us why Captain Jean-Luc Picard is in command of the Federation flagship. He's all business where the success of the mission is absolutely vital. You can tell he sees ahead of time the tough decisions that he's going to have to make, but make them he does, and with supreme confidence. He even goes so far as to say that he believes at the end of the episode that Maxwell's theory about the Cardassians rearming was correct, but that he also believes a lasting peace between the Federation and the Cardassians is truly in both of their interests. And this episode is also home to one of Picard's great philosophical moments, where he gives one of his iconic speeches to Miles O'Brien in the transporter room.
I think when one has been angry for a very long time, one gets used to it. Then it becomes comfortable, like old leather. And finally, it becomes so familiar that one can't ever remember feeling any other way.
And of course, one of the other main characters in this episode is Miles Edward O'Brien. And his character's fleshed out a little more in this episode, which is great to see. His connection to Captain Maxwell and some of the events that he was involved in during the Cardassian War come to light. Particularly, while they were on the Rutledge together, they were part of the Starfleet task force that responded to the massacre at Setlik 3. And this is the first time that particular incident is brought about in Star Trek canon. This is obviously where his negative feelings for the Cardassians come from. In fact, the scene in 10 Forward between O'Brien and Glyn Darrow, one of Masset's aides, really gives us an insight into Miles O'Brien and the prejudices he feels. And it isn't that he hates the Cardassians, it isn't that he hates Glyn Darrow. It's that he hates what he became because of the Cardassians. And the issue of learning how to live with the consequences of war and how it changes you is one of the very difficult questions that Star Trek addresses in this episode. And this scene in particular is without a doubt what made Miles O'Brien the perfect choice of character to port across to Deep Space Nine. Because bear in mind, within 12 months of this episode airing, production for Deep Space Nine had started. And being able to move this character over to Deep Space Nine, the new series, with some relevance and history in his background, it enabled them to bring an air of familiarity to the new show. And now we come to the villain of the episode, Captain Benjamin Maxwell. Twice honoured with the Federation's highest citation for courage and valour, Maxwell is dealing with the loss of his wife and his children during the raid on Setlik 3, and also his prejudices against the Cardassians. Or maybe the point is he hasn't dealt with it. Everything in the way Maxwell talks leads us to believe that he hasn't come to terms with being at peace with the Cardassians after everything that's happened. His deep-rooted suspicions of them rearming, ready for an attack on the Federation, gives him what he feels is justification to begin a campaign of preemptive strikes. When finally confronted by Picard telling him that he knows of nothing out there that could possibly justify what he's done, Maxwell begins to justify his actions with paranoid statements. Information comes my way. I know what they're doing. I smell it. Lives were at stake. We had to act now. This man truly believes he has taken the only course of action that he can to prevent another war and prevent the same atrocities happening again. There's also signs in this episode that Maxwell is suffering from PTSD and struggling not only to come to terms with what's happened to him, but also to find a place in peacetime. And with that, this episode raises another bold question. Where do old soldiers go when the war is over? And this is a question that's brought up in several Star Trek episodes across multiple shows. In the climactic scene, O'Brien beams over to the Phoenix to stop Captain Maxwell. Here we see two men who have shared the traumatic experience of war. Two men who know how the events of war and what you have to do to survive can haunt you for the rest of your life. And after sharing what's now become a very recognisable song to most Trekkies in The Minstrel Boy, Captain Maxwell finally comes to the realisation that he's not going to win this one. So, what didn't I like about the episode? I've got to be honest, there's actually very little that I don't like about this episode. I think the characters are great, and I love the fact that Picard is all business throughout this episode. If I'm going to be picky, it would have been nice to see a few more external shots of the Cardassian Galore class. At the end of the day, this is the first time that ship's ever shown on TV, and it gets about 10 seconds of screen time. Also, Troy. This is the perfect episode for the ship's counsellor to join the rest of the crew centre stage, considering the themes that are brought up. But once the Cardassians are beamed aboard into Transporter Room 3, and she picks up on Miles O'Brien's emotional response to that, we never see her again. Instead, we see O'Brien denying his true feelings to his wife Keiko whilst they're having potato casserole. Now, don't get me wrong, this isn't one of those Troy is a pointless character statements. In fact, I quite like Deanna Troi as a character, and neither is it an attempt to take away from Keiko's role as O'Brien's wife. I simply think it was a missed opportunity for a character that isn't given enough to do. So, now we come to the rating of the episode. You know what? I'm going to give this episode a very, very solid Warp Factor 8.5. I think it's an absolutely brilliant episode. I love pretty much every part of it, and I really struggled to find any elements of the show that I didn't enjoy. So we'd be really interested to hear what you thought about this episode and what you thought about our review video. Drop us some comments in the box down below. Don't forget, if you haven't already, please consider hitting that subscribe button, give us a like on the video, and also tap the bell for notifications so you find out whenever we post any new content. Thanks for watching, guys. Ensign, set a course for home. Warp 8.5. Engage.